Alexandra, Dr. Whitlock, really nice to meet you both. How are you both doing today?
Good, thank
Doing
you.
really well.
So, Alexandra, I want to start with you. You are an award-winning filmmaker. You've done great work in the past, and you've done everything from Syrian refugees to kids with disabilities, and now you're tackling something here, which is a really big, important topic in teen mental health. So, what was it like doing this documentary, and what was most surprising to you during your journey here?
Well, clearly I like to keep things light. I'm just kidding. I like to tackle, I think, difficult subjects because I feel like the most, we learn so much about resilience and the human condition in these ways. And I felt like this was a really important film to make. Sheila Nevins had brought the idea to me and she wanted me to do it for MTV. And I really felt very strongly that this was something that needed to happen. And I understood the intense need for this to be talked about. And I think the thing that I was most surprised about was that, for my generation, there's more of a stigma. And I know that some of the subjects in the film talk about the stigma, but I was so impressed with the young people and their ability to talk about mental health issues and to really open up, and how much they wanted to give back was really incredible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's most striking to me. I mean, listen, I'm a millennial and it's not something that was talked about even when I was growing up. And Dr. Whitlock, I'll bring you in here because when you think about Gen Z, they're dealing with mental health in a different way. They've had social media their whole lives, right? They're talking about it, they're dealing with it, but yet the suicidal thoughts are still there, even though we are having these conversations. So what was it like for you to just think about everything involved here?
I mean, it was really fun to work on. I didn't know what to expect when I started to speak with the young people in terms of sort of how the conversation would go, but they're all incredibly articulate. They were really knowledgeable about their own experience and able to connect it to the experience of other people. I thought the combination of young people that were talking about their stories was just extraordinary. And I am really struck by the capacity of Gen Zs to talk about these issues. But like you say, we still see a lot of mental health issues, which I think points to two things. One is talking isn't usually enough. It's enough, it's the beginning, but it's not enough. And the other is that we have raised children in a contributor to anxiety, depression, and a whole bunch of other kinds of conditions. So we've increased our capacity to talk about it, but we've also increased the inputs that create the conditions in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, all of this was going on already. And then, Alexandra, you throw a pandemic into it. So kids are not going to school. Kids are not seeing their friends anymore. They're on social media more. They're completely enveloped by their own thoughts. So how did the pandemic factor in everything here? Because this is filmed with these 9 kids at home dealing with all this. But what's most striking about the impact of the pandemic on mental health and suicidal thoughts?
Well, I mean, I would say that I think Dr. Whitlock can speak more to this than I can in terms of the increase. But I did think what I was really struck by when we first connected on Zoom was this idea that here we all are dealing with anxiety, sometimes for the first time, globally, anxiety, isolation. And I found it really interesting that these 9 young people had all of these tools that they had been working on for years and years. And so that there was so much wisdom that they had to share. And it's not easy for them. And it's not like everyone's just fine. They're still recovering and they still have to, put one foot in front of the other and work on their issues, but they have tools. And I thought it was really interesting. I do think that as the pandemic has continued, there is an increase, especially in young people who aren't getting to go to school, who aren't, there's a developmental interruption. And I feel like Dr. Whitlock, you can probably speak more to that and how that would
Yeah, Dr.
increase.
Whitlock, feel free to jump in here because I think Alexander makes some great points. Just the developmental process of kids right now has been interrupted and they don't really know which way is up at this point. So what do you think is the biggest impact of the pandemic right now on teenage mental health?
I think Alexandria hit it right on. I mean, it's just the longevity, it's just day after day after day of the same thing. And I was struck by the same thing, like the young people who had already, that we were talking to had already developed such a suite of skills that they were able to deploy those pretty quickly. I do think though, as things have gone on, even young people who are even people, it's not even just young people who have pre-existing vulnerabilities and have not been, you're not really hardy, are probably really feeling it. And I don't know anybody who's not feeling it. It feels like we're all in the depths of, wow, you just have to be with yourself a lot, so there's when you have some experience doing that, when you're somewhat comfortable with that, it seems like those of us who have done that are probably faring a little bit better than those of us who haven't. I do think the one upside to all of this is we are in it together. I mean, we are all experiencing it together, even though it feels like it's a uniquely personal thing. I do think we're going to come out of this with a lot of questions and unknowns, and not just because of the interruptions, but because we're coming back into a landscape that's really unclear. None of us know exactly what real life outside of COVID is going to look like. And even more, I don't think we know what we want it to look like. So in some ways, that's what intrigues me the most. I mean, what will we create? What will young people create, fashion out of what's left? How will they pick up their lives? How will we collectively pick up lives? So there's risks there, but there's also opportunities.
That's why I feel like Each and Every Day is such a fitting title for this documentary, because it's something that is ever present for all of us. And really, it's just fascinating how this is hitting a younger generation. And Alexandra, you mentioned, just talking to these kids over Zoom and just, creating a documentary in this moment. But what were some other big takeaways for you? Because you've talked to so many fascinating people over the years with your work. What was it about these kids and this project, even just like the broad stroke that you have of just 9 different kids from 9 different, points in the country? What really was most interesting to you here?
Well, I've often taken a community and gone into a community that has more in common than they do, and than they are different. But what was interesting about this is that even though there was a commonality, which was mental health, suicidal ideation, and some attempts, there was so much diversity in the experience, and I found that really interesting. There was so much diversity among the 9 participants, and it was really great to see. It was a struggle in some ways, though, because I'm used to embedding with people. So the filmmaking process, just the idea of having to pivot and do it remotely was really challenging, but also interesting. And the technology and how we were able to use the technology to make the film was, wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. So that was quite incredible. And I learned a lot about them, and I learned a lot about how much they wanted to give back, and, just really incredible resilience.
Yeah, I think you speak to a lot of really interesting things, just in the ways the pandemic has kind of opened things up technologically, even from a conversation perspective, just the types of things that we're able to speak about at this moment. And Dr. Whitlock, I want to bring you back in here, because we talk so much about the stigma with mental health, and it feels like not enough people understand the why in this, what's going on behind the scenes for this person that's dealing with depression or dealing with a suicidal thought. How do we get beyond that? How do we get people to understand the why and what this person is going through? What do you think are some things that can help people out if they're dealing with this in their own lives?
I actually feel like the answer is in the film, because the how for me is exactly what happened. It's authenticity. It's, people being willing to be real with themselves in front of another person, not necessarily in front of an entire audience, but at least with another person in their life. These things can feel so personal. To struggle in the ways that we struggle when we have a mental health challenge feels so vulnerable and personal. So it's really understandable that we'd want to sort of hold it inside, because we don't want to risk the possibility that it's going to get worse if we expose it to somebody and they have a reaction that's uncomfortable. But that is the way that we all learn to see what it looks like and to feel, because it's not just seeing, right? When you connect with the stories that Alexandra presents in this film, you feel it too. You can sort of feel who they are, how their story unfolded. And what I love even more, and something you just touched on, Alexandra, was about the resilience of it. And I've seen that in my research too. There's a very large number of people who go through these dark nights of the soul, sometimes for long periods of time, but they come out wiser, I don't want to say better humans, but certainly deeper, more compassionate people. And they often do want to give back to others. They want to share something of their experience. So in some ways, maybe, you know, if we can help people, all of us who struggle, learn how to do that, or open to that, we could inadvertently create a you know, deeper connection between all of us through this shared real life experience.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. And I think this documentary will help a lot of people. So Alexandra, why don't we bring a full circle here? When people do check this out, whether they are teenagers, whether they are parents, whether they have no connection to this and just want to learn more about mental health, what are you hoping will be some of the big takeaways from your film?
I really hope that people who are identifying will feel emboldened to reach out, to tell someone, a parent or a guidance counselor, or, you know, there's Youthline, you know, there's many different kinds of places that they can go for help. I'm hoping that people who see it, who, you know, worry about a friend, feel comfortable. I mean, one of the things that I learned, which I didn't know, was that, you know, if you think someone's thinking about suicide, ask them. That, you know, asking them is not, talking about it is not going to put them at greater risk. And so, you know, that the most important thing is that we're talking about it, and that there are many people struggle with mental health challenges at some point in their lives, and there are varying degrees of that, and that that it's just really important to be open about it and start a dialogue.
It's amazing how one simple question like that, or just how are you, can really open the floodgates to things. And I think this documentary is really going to be enlightening to people for each and every day. It's coming MTV February 16th. Alexandra Shiva, Dr. Janis Whitlock. Thank you both very much. Really appreciate the time, and stay healthy, all right?
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, thank you.